Dollar Circle. And now we are recording in three, two. Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors all over the world. This next guest is a repeat guest, and this is one of our first that we can have back on.
Encore, encore.
Encore. We had such a good conversation in the first one, and he has multiple books. So we said, come on back because we have a lot to talk about. And we have him here right now. August Turak has another book out there. I think this is, I don't know if this is the first one or the second one, but you said that you look at them as almost like bookends. And this one is called Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, one CEO's quest for meaning and authenticity. So, August Turak, welcome back to Million Dollar Stories, sir.
Right. And of course, let's come on, let's throw the Pittsburgh thing in there, right?
Yeah, that's right. The Michael Keaton stories. That's
And
you're damn
I'm from
right.
I'm from Pittsburgh. So actually my cousin just resigned as the strength and conditioning coach for the Steelers after 24 years with them. But
Wow. And you're rocking the pit hat. Is that for me? Is that
yeah,
for, yeah,
yeah, I went no,
okay.
yeah, we both went to Pitt. And you went to Pitt, didn't you?
I went to Duquesne. I partied at Pitt.
Oh, I went to Pitt. My dad and mother both went to Duquesne, and my brothers went to Duquesne Law School. So there's a
Oh,
lot of
nice.
Duquesne connection there too.
Yeah, we've definitely close ties. I told my dad whenever I finished up that episode, I said, I know a guy who knows Michael Keaton very well. And he was like, because my dad graduated, and so I think I might have told you, my dad's obviously my dad's last name is Fallett, but my dad's first name is John. And he went to the same school, and I think he graduated 2 years prior or 2 years afterwards. So I was like, Turak, have you ever heard of a Turak? And he's like, no, I don't
Well,
know.
I didn't go to school with Mike.
No, yeah, you worked with him. That was it.
Mike went to Montour High School.
That's it.
Um,
That's where my dad went.
yeah, he went to Montour, and he's from Robinson Township. And I actually worked with him out in Coriopolis on a surveying crew for a couple of years. That's how I know Mike.
Gotcha.
So we didn't actually go to school together. But anyway, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah. Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. Okay.
Right.
So you are a spiritual guy. You're all about purpose and meaning. And I think that that's why we can get along so well. I think it all starts with the self. And I believe, and I don't know if we talked about this in the first episode, but I believe a man will stop where he finds peace, not power, not success, but where he finds peace. And I think once you find peace, it's like you have everything. And whenever you don't need anything anymore, that's when you can obtain it, if that makes sense.
Right, right. Well, you're making the same point that I make in Business Secrets of Trappist Monks. Well, first of all, as I mentioned, I'm a accidental author because I was an entrepreneur. I worked for MTV when it first started out. I was one of the founders of MTV. Eventually became an entrepreneur. But spirituality was always my true love. And I was coaching college students at Duke University back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they talked me into entering a contest for the Templeton Foundation's Power of Purpose essay contest, where I had to answer the question, what is the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life in 3,500 words or less? I'd never written anything before in my life for publication. And I had like a week to do it in, and I was up against professional writers. It was international, been going on for over a year. Anyway, long story short, I wrote this essay about a monk called Brother John from this monastery, a Trappist monastery in South Carolina, where I hang out all the time. I'm a monastic guest there, which means that I stay sometimes for extended periods, like a month or 2 months or even 3 months, where I live just like a monk, wear a habit and the whole bit. They have a special program. They're very cool. I highly recommend it. Um, it's a wonderful program. It's only open to men, but it's a really cool program. You
Hmm.
get up at 3 in the morning with the monks and do everything that the monks do. But so I wrote this essay about an encounter on Christmas Eve between me and Brother John that taught me the purpose of life. And lo and behold, I won the $100,000 grand prize. And I went up against 10,000 essays from 47 countries, and I won the grand prize. And this launched me on my writing career. A couple years later, I was just hanging around here at my farm, and I ended up writing what I thought was a white paper on why these monks are so darn good at business.
Hmm.
When they don't care about business and they only work 4 hours a day, they keep silent. They're all 65 years old. Their businesses are very mundane, eggs and mushrooms and fertilizer, and yet everything they touch turns to gold. so why are they so gosh darn good at business? And I wrote this white paper. I sent it out to some friends. Lo and behold, I get a call from the Forbes magazine, the editor of Forbes magazine. He said, somebody gave me this. I love it. I want to print it but it has to be a 4-part article because it's not wasn't designed to be an article. He said, I said, we're willing to do that. I said, yeah, great. He said, I don't want to change a word, except I want to change the title. I want to call it Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. And so he publishes it as business, and it goes viral, and it became the most popular for several weeks. It was the most popular article on Forbes. They used to have a box up there that would give you the top 5 articles, and for like 2 weeks it was Business Secrets Part 1, Business Secrets Part 2, Business Secrets Part 3, Business Secrets. I had the top 4 out of the 5. That led to Columbia Business School Publishing getting in touch with me and asking me if I would like to turn it into a book. Which I then did, which is called Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks.
By the way, 238 reviews. This is resonating quite well with the audience. So incredible work, man.
If I'm having a bad day, what I do is I go on Amazon, I read some of those reviews, and I think, wow, I wish somebody'd say something like that. Wait a second, they are saying it about you. It always cheers me up. Yeah, it's been translated into Spanish and Portuguese and Chinese, and there's an audible version of it and everything. So it's far outstripped what I expected of it.
5 stars across the board, man. I mean, people are loving this.
Yeah, it's really been extremely really popular book, and it's led to me actually giving talks at the Vatican. I've been to the Vatican and talked to the Vatican universities there. So the reason I say they're bookends is because what I end up saying, that the purpose of life, in my first essay, The Brother John, which is now another book, I turned it into a book called Brother John, the Monk, a Pilgrim, and the Purpose of Life. The purpose of life is to become the best human being we can possibly be. It's not relative. It's not different folks for different strokes for different folks. It's not what you feel or what. No, every single human beings here on the planet to become the best example of a human being as you can possibly be. Now, of course, that's where the variety comes in, because you may do it as a doctor and I may do it as a lawyer or whatever, but we're all here to do the same thing. And then I move further and I say, what was the message that Brother John taught me? What is the best human being? Selflessness. And I pick up, so that's the individual. So I pick up on this concept in the Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. And I say that, what we're all longing, we think we're longing for selfishness, but we're all longing for selflessness. And my proof, so the first part of the book, I get into my proof for this concept. And my proof is that everything that we think of as like self-consciousness is a very unpleasant experience. So when you're self-conscious, you can't get an erection, you can't enjoy a party, you get tongue-tied when you're trying to give a speech.
You're thinking of yourself. That's all you're thinking of.
Exactly. Yeah. Boy, I like talking to you. And think of it, when you're depressed, and I've gone through deep depression, when somebody is very, very depressed, that's all you can think about is yourself. Yep. You sit there in a chair and you think, I'm depressed, I'm depressed, I'm depressed. You can't, so we have expressions like getting out of your own way. So when are we happiest? We're happiest when we forget ourselves. We're happy when we're absorbed in a task. When we say we're absorbed in a task, what is absorbed? Our sense of self. When the time flies by and we're having the most fun is when we have no conception that there's any separation between me and what I'm trying to do or where I'm at. And when we get into trouble is when we get in our own way. And I said, when you get depressed, you feel like the world is too much with me, but it's not the world that's too much with you. You're too much with yourself. But so what we're all trying to do is get rid of this sense of selfishness. We're actually trying to long for, but unfortunately we make the mistake of using. So what do we use in order to try and get rid of this distraction? I go to I'm getting in trouble with my family because my brother and I, we live in North Carolina, so we're Carolina Hurricanes fans now, right? and we betrayed the Penguins.
Well, I
Even though
think you can this year. You're allowed to do it this year. They stink this year.
even though we watched the game last night against Florida. But anyway, and we'll talk about that later in the program. I'll give you a blow by blow about the game. But I go to the games with my brother, and there's not a second that they don't blare the jumbotron on you. What's that telling you? Is that people cannot live with themselves for 1 second without being distracted. We pay all this money to be distracted all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, what I really pointed out in my saying that, hey, we really want is selflessness, is that we go to these movies. And back when I was in marketing, we had a concept called dollar votes. It's one of my favorite business concepts, which is if you want to find out what people really care about, don't ask them. If you ask people world peace, everybody cares about world peace, right? But watch what they spend their money on.
Show me what you buy, and I'll show you what's important to you.
Exactly. Boy, I like talking to you. So, so we called that dollar votes. So I actually built a business around that. We didn't do surveys. We would actually try to sell products. And if people were willing to buy them, then we would build them. But so we're looking for dollar votes. So what do I see when I look around? What are people spending their money on? Stories. We spend billions and billions of dollars every year going to movies and reading books or whatever it is on storytelling. And as Joseph Campbell, so that tells me there's something that these stories are delivering that we are insatiably hungry for. And regardless, by the way, whether it's good times or bad, in bad times, we even spend more money going to the movies, right? So what did Joseph Campbell come up with? He came up with this idea, and he didn't invent it, but he showed that for thousands of years, all these stories, if you scrape away the surface differences, are all based on the hero's journey. And these stories are all, and I mentioned movies like Groundhog Day and The Devil Wears Prada and Star Wars, and all these different movies that I mentioned. They're all based on the same thing, the hero's journey. And real quickly, the hero's journey, and I condensed it for the sake of brevity, which six you were saying.
God, I love this type of conversation. It's all about the hero's journey everywhere.
Exactly.
You go. Yep.
So the first stage of the hero's journey is the call.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we would call vocation. In religious literature, it's the burning bush calling to Moses. That's his call. Or the Virgin Mary shows up. The angel shows up to the Virgin Mary and says, "Hey, guess what? We got plans for you." That's the call. The second stage in the movies, it's typically, I got this movie in my mind. Is this, imagine this car coming through the desert and the dust is all around it and everything. It finds this old ramshackle house in the middle of the desert someplace, and it parks, and then out of it is this spiffy young captain in his spiffy uniform. And all of a sudden the door opens and here comes an old Clint Eastwood, drunk, and at 12 noon. And what the hell do you want? And he says, "We need you to come back because only you can stop you're the only one that can fly the plane that'll save the universe." So that's his call. All these movies are, if you look at all these movies, there'll always be a call. Mm-hmm. The hero is called. The second stage is resistance to the call. Moses says, "No, not me, not me." Mary reacts with terror, with abject terror. So the angel has to say, "Be not be afraid." That's her resistance to the call, fear. In the movie, "Get the hell out of here. I wouldn't come back and lay out the way you guys treated me when I had to put up with all that BS for 30 years in the military. I wouldn't, So there's always that resistance to the call. Then the hero eventually accepts.
Yep.
For whatever reasons, he eventually accepts. The next stage is the desert. And this is where he gets trained. There's always a training, whether it's, he's got to go out, and Clint Eastwood's got to be trained on the airplane. And it looks like he's not going to be able to do it. Or Yoda is yelling, "Don't try, do," as he's training him in the desert. Or the Karate Kid, on, off, or Morpheus in the Matrix keeps beating the snot out of Neo over and over again, until he finally can learn to fly or whatever it is. So that's the desert stage. And in the Bible and all these other
Moses, 40 years,
Moses has
right?
to go out in the desert for 40 years. Jesus goes out in the desert for 40
40 days.
days. There, all these religions have the desert motif. The next stage of the hero's journey, the hero now emerges and he's trained. He's full of power. He's full of piss and vinegar, as they say, right? Now the temptation, the great trial happens. Is he going to, this is the reason why we're hanging on this, because is he going to use this power for good, for selfless reasons, or for selfish reasons? If it's Darth Vader, he goes to the dark side. If it's Al Pacino in The Godfather, he goes to the dark side. Um, um, but regardless, so that's the tension point. How's he going to use this power? And then the next stage of the hero's journey, which I think is done is the death and rebirth. There's some kind of transformation that has to happen because because he starts out usually as a selfish you know what, and he's got to be transformed.
Mm-hmm.
And in Groundhog Day, finally after years and years, they even imply it's kind of centuries of banging his head against the wall. He finally stops trying to manipulate people and stuff like that, and he goes through a transformation and he becomes a selfless person.
This is where Neo realizes there is no spoon.
Well, even more, if you look in that's my favorite, because what happens there, Mike, is that Neo actually dies. He's fighting Agent Smith, and Agent Smith kills him, literally kills him. His heart stops, but he is connected by a phone line back to the mothership. He's in the Matrix, which is the desert, and he's Trinity.
God.
Why is her name
Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit?
Why, exactly. You're the first person that's picked up on that. Yes, it's Trinity. So this is, and what is the phone line? Grace. This is the way she's in heaven, and he's mired in the matrix, which is not real, which is the earth. And so her love comes down that phone line in the form of grace and Trinity, and brings him back to life. And once he comes back to life, he's no longer fighting on his own power that he got from training with Morpheus. He's now got God's power on his side, and now he's able to overcome and defeat. And then the final stage of the hero's journey is the return to help others. And that's wonderfully done. If you've seen The Devil Wears Prada, people make fun of me because
I actually don't know that movie.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Streep. Is that a Meryl Streep?
Yeah, it's a classic chick flick. But in the very end, she gives away her clothing, she gives away everything, and you can see her walking up, and she's been transformed. She no longer needs Meryl Streep, and now she's going back to help others. And so that's. But I said, if you now take that process and now let's boil it down to its essentials. The entire hero's journey is a transformational journey from selfishness to selflessness. And the reason why we identify with all these heroes, whether they're science fiction or whether they're, true to life, is they're all being transformed from selfish people into selfless people. And that tells me if we're willing to spend billions of dollars to watch other people be transformed, that tells me that's what we really want. Mm-hmm. We want to be transformed from selfish to selfless people, but you can't have it happen by watching a movie any more than you can pay somebody to work out for you and get in shape. And I think that's
the inspiration for you to do it, right? We want to be called to the adventure. And so there are people out there listening who don't want the trials and tribulations and the struggles. They want it easy. Well, it doesn't happen without the dragon in front of you. And so if a dragon does approach you, you should be thankful because that is there to bring out the best in you.
Boy,
and the best in you is selflessness.
Mike, you're fabulous. You're incredible. Yes, exactly. And I point out in the book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, and believe me, we're going to get to business here in a minute, how all this applies to business. But because I built a couple of very successful software companies using all this stuff. But yes, what everybody wants to pretend. This is where you get into all this. It's all relative, and everybody's got their own path. And every time I dig down into everybody's got their own damn path. Their path skips the desert. They want to have their own path because they can define it the way they want to define it, which means I don't have to face the dragon. I don't have to go into the desert. I don't have to go be trained. I don't have to sacrifice. I don't have to do all the things in the desert. And I pointed out in the book, I said, what is the scariest part? And by the way, I lived this, so I know it. What is the scariest part of the desert? I said, let's imagine that you're a minor league baseball player. Let's call you double A baseball player, and you're pushing 26, 27, 28 years old. And you're in the desert. I said, what's the hardest part about you haven't made the majors yet, so you're in the desert, right? What's the hardest part of this? It's not the bus drives. It's not the cheap food. It's not sleeping in motel rooms, sharing motel rooms with some other guy. It's not some coach screaming at you. That stuff is fine. It's when you're laying in bed at night thinking about your girlfriend telling you, if you were going to make it, you'd have made it by now.
Mm.
This is an ego trip you're on. Why don't you give up? Why don't you surrender? Why don't you, my father will give you a great job at the factory. We can get married and live happily ever after. Why do you keep doing this? Why are you doing it? And you're laying there and you're wondering, maybe she's right. Maybe she's right. How do I know? How do I know for sure that, on the other hand, if I give up, how do I know that I could be called up next week, And this is the agony of being in the desert because because it gets really, really hard at times and you want to give up.
Right. With no vision, you will perish. I believe that's part of the Bible too, right? A man without vision will perish, or a people without vision. And so what you're saying is that if you don't have a vision, a clear, distinct target, self-doubt will creep in and the voices will start to sway you off your path. And that's the worst feeling.
Well, I would take you one step further than that. It's not just even if you're, and I was very, very committed to my vision, but even then the voices hound you, and they hound you anyway. And these, who knows, depending on your religious perspective, are these temptations from outside of you, or they're just the temptations from inside of you, but it's like you look around and you say, why am I making it so hard on myself? Well, everybody else looks like they're getting on with their lives. And meanwhile, I'm doing all this stuff that nobody else seems to be bothered. Why, why me? Why do I got to do, there's all this kind of stuff. And this is the dragon, by the way. This is the dragon fighting this stuff. Because you know what, Mike, to throw it even to another, to make it even more complex, there are times to walk away. There are times to look in the mirror. There are times to look in the mirror and say you're 34 years old and you're playing single A ball and you aren't going to make the majors.
Yeah.
So this is what makes the complexity. And of course, you got to take a step back. This is what makes those movies so much fun to watch. We watch these other people go through all this stuff, these Rocky movies. Should I quit? Do I have what it takes? How do I know? I always relate to the first Rocky movie. One of my favorite scenes in that is when he's trying to express to the bartender, all I've ever wanted was a shot. I just wanted my shot. Oh, you really? He keeps talking. He keeps saying a shot. And finally he walks away and the bartender looks after him and says, you want a shot? And he pours himself a shot of whiskey. There's your shot.
There's a shot. Yeah.
Because you're living in a world of bartenders. And you're trying to do something with your life, and nobody seems to understand that. Everybody's saying, what the hell are you doing? I had to live that. So I want to move along to the next concept, and that is that the most important thing in business and in life is motivation. And I spent many years as a salesman, and then later as a sales manager and a vice president of sales, and finally a CEO. And the primary thing is if I can motivate people. And you have to understand, even psychology, what is motivation? I remember I asked a CEO one time, his company was about a $500 million company. And I said, this story's in my book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. And I said, what's your job description? What do you do? And he said, well, if you follow me around, you'd think I do a lot of things. But he said, I only have one job. I build passion. He said, what a phrase. He said, you read all the time. He said, you think talent is in short supply? Talent is not in short supply. Passion is in short supply. He said, you read all the time about some woman picking a car up off her child, and some 80-pound woman. Why? Because she cares that much. He said, my job is to is to get put passion in place. He said, and once that happens, my job becomes making sure everybody takes enough vacation and staying the hell out of the way. So, and I saw that again. We built two companies, and I tell the whole story in Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks about how we started with $2,500 investments, all the money we ever put into our company. We started with a business plan. I was four of us. My partner said, our business plan is we're smart guys. We'll figure out something to do.
I like his philosophy.
And that was it. That was all we knew we were going to be doing. Um, and we started a business like that without, and we said, we're not going to put another dime in this business. We're not going to borrow any money. We're not going to put any more of our own money into it. If we can't make 2,500 is what it costs for 1 month's rent and 1 month's phones, et cetera. He said, we can't make $2,500 the first month robbing old ladies or doing something. We'll close this business down rather than just string it along by putting money back into it. And we ended up over the next 7 years building it up into two multi-million-dollar companies on internally generated cash with no influx, no borrowed money, no investors. And we ended up selling the companies to an Israeli company, which then a few years later, that our combined companies were flipped to BMC Software down in Texas for 150 million in cash.
Jeez.
So I tell the whole story about how we did all this using the monks' philosophy and all the things that I learned from the monks and before that through my spiritual stuff. And what did I find out about what do people really want in life? What we really want in life is this transformation. Everything in life is longing for transformation. Every acorn wants to be transformed into an oak. Every caterpillar is longing to be transformed into a butterfly. But there's three kinds of transformation. So people are the same way. We're longing for transformation. What are the three forms of transformation? When a thirsty man drinks, he transforms his condition. When a poor man hits the lottery, he transforms his circumstances. But when Mr. Scrooge wakes up on Christmas morning an utterly new man, or all these other guys and all these other heroes that we were just talking about from movies, they have experienced a transformation of being. Oh. And you're a completely new person. It's a transformation of who you fundamentally are. And I said, the problem with life is that too many of us mistake. We have a hole in our soul and we try to fill it with transformations of condition, smoking cigarettes, drinking, drugs, sex. Those are transformations of condition. And there's nothing evil about them, except if you start if you start trying to fill that hole in your soul go overboard with donuts, you'll just get fat. Then you move up the scale and you try to do it with a transformation of circumstances. That's getting wealthy, getting powerful, getting famous. I said, those don't, they're fine as long as you're using them properly. But if you start thinking this is the answer, the next thing you know, talking about actors, and luckily Michael Keaton has avoided this, so many of them self-destruct because they're under the impression that if I can force you through power and fame to think of me in a different way, that will make me a different person. But they deep down inside, they know that they're still the same SOB they were before they got famous. Mm-hmm. So they end up feeling like a fraud because they've got all these people treating them like
imposter syndrome. That's right.
Yeah. Imposter. Like you're great talking to. Yep. Exactly. So the imposter syndrome burns them up. Same with people that are trying to, they're trying to find selflessness through distractions and drugs and alcohol and stuff. That's what they're really trying to do, forget themselves. And that's why we say, forget your troubles by drinking. No, you're not trying to forget your troubles. Your troubles are your selfishness. So you're trying to, medicate yourself so you don't have to think about about yourself. So we're really all longing for this transformation of being that is going to make us into a selfless person.
Wow. And it sounds like there has to be a death and a rebirth. And it's so symbolic in, like you said, the Matrix, where you have to die or a piece of you has to die, right? Death is a part of birth. And so
what did Jesus say? That you have to die by living. While living, you have to pick up your cross. I mean, in the deepest, and I've spent my life on a spiritual path and studied all different religions, And in my third book, which we talked about last time, One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment, Not Less Than Everything, is called One Man's Quest for the fundamental. There is a concept in every religion has a mystical tradition. Yoga for Hinduism, um, and Zen for Buddhism, and Christian mysticism for Christianity. They all have Sufism for Islam, and every single one of them are built around the same thing. In order to truly experience God as He really is, you have to die first, which they mean the ego.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's a very scary process to go through because the ego is all you really know, and you are quote unquote identified with that ego. And when the ego does start to die, you feel like you're dying.
So is the ego a part of just our human nature simply because of our
Yes,
survival mechanism? So it's there for a reason, but it only gets you so far.
Absolutely. God, it's fun talking to you. Um, you're absolutely right. In a Jungian psychology, you start the baby in the womb, or some people even say before the womb, has no sense of self. It's completely identified with the universe. There's no dividing line between me, outside and inside, or anything like that. It's one with everything. And then even later, the baby is one with the mother. But at some point in time, the baby starts to develop its own sense of individuality, and the ego starts to develop. It leaves the mother and starts to identify with the father and starts developing this thing called an ego. Now, according to Jungian, this is the true, this is the parable of the Garden of Eden. This is how we leave the
I was
Garden of
just about to
Eden.
say Eden, right? Here's the apple. Don't listen to anybody. Don't listen to God. This is way better. This tastes better. This is better
You,
for you.
this is all about me. Now, interestingly, I was reading this psychology said, so the answer becomes, well, if you had a different way of raising kids and blah, 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 could you spare them this painful separation? He said, no, this is a necessary. This is part of the necessary. So what happens is the ego development, the individuality is an important stage, but most people never go beyond it. And that's why it becomes very painful because you become alienated. You're alienated. And as Ken Wilber said, there's two things to do. It's very uncomfortable. Individuality it's self-consciousness. It's very uncomfortable. It's alienation. Um, and there's two ways that people try to deal with this. And he said one way is to go backwards. And that way is to anesthetize yourself, use alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever, to go back to a more primitive, animal, more animal type. Or nature religions go back to where you try to just become one with the forest and the trees somehow. He said that always fails because what we're being invited to do is the transformation to another stage of consciousness, a higher stage of consciousness, which they call cosmic consciousness, enlightenment, Satori, nirvana. Every religion's got this state of a higher state that you get transformed into. And that's where you find what you started with. That's where you find that ultimate peace. But getting back to Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, I really go into it by showing each chapter in the book starts with one of the monks' virtues like faith, and starts showing how I used it, how they use it in their business, and then how I use it in my business. But to cut to the chase, the point that I'm making is that we think that selfishness is necessary for business when actually it is not. It's a counter, just like in everything else, it's counterproductive. It's like you started by saying peace. I'm maybe paraphrasing here unfairly, but
A man stops where he finds peace, not where
right,
he finds power or
right.
success or
But
money.
peace is not the goal. Peace is the byproduct of
Right.
reaching the goal.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you
And
go.
what I say in business is that money, profits, all the things that people think they want, and they think that selfishness is going to get them, are actually the byproducts of being selfless. What I keep saying over and over again in Business Secrets is the more successfully you forget your selfish motivations, the more successful you become. Now, let me give you some examples. I come up in sales. I was a very good salesman. I was good enough that I was on the cover of Selling Magazine one time as a selling hero. And what I learned is that every great salesman has to forget about his product, forget about the commissions, forget about his quota. And instead, he has to selflessly focus on helping his customer. And the more successfully he unselfishly focuses on helping his customer, the more sales he makes, the easier it is to make his quota, and the more money he makes. It's the byproduct, the trailing indicator. Let's talk about leadership. Most people want leaders. They want to be leaders for selfish reasons. They think, I want to be a leader so I get promoted faster and I'll get make more money and my chicks will dig me or whatever the heck. But the fact of the matter is, the task of a leader, your job as a leader, is not to get yourself promoted. Your job as a leader is to get other people promoted. And if you lay in bed at night agonizing over how am I going to get Mike promoted? How do I get Mike promoted? You, as a trailing indicator, will be promoted faster yourself, because the more successful your people become, the more successful you become. Therefore, you get promoted faster. But you have to forget, and the same thing even with a corporation. The more successfully the corporation forgets about profits and instead focuses on achieving its mission of helping its customers and so providing customers with something that is going to help them, the profits take care of themselves. Mm. These are all the trailing indicators. These are all the byproducts. And there's many other examples like that. And so
how do I make others look better? And if you can do that, it's so hard to do it in the beginning, but the more you focus on it, it becomes second nature. You do it everywhere. And I just watched, and it just kind of ties in with what you just said. I just watched The Dating Coach, she's a female dating coach that helps women date men. And one of the pieces of advice that she put out there on social media was, in order for you to get a good man, make him look better. Forget about all your needs, everything, but just make him look better. It's directly in alignment with what you just said, and I guarantee it goes vice versa, right?
Absolutely. I wrote. One of the things I also do is write for. I haven't done it for a couple of years now, but I used to write for Forbes as a leadership contributor, and I used to churn out all these articles for Forbes, and that opportunity came out of the fact they published my article that went viral. But what I wrote an article about, if you want to get ahead, if you want to be a great leader, you have to first learn how to be a great follower. And I said, one of the things a great follower has to be fanatically committed. How can I make my boss look good? My job is to make my boss look good. And I get into all these other things. You never run you never go into a meeting with your boss where you decide that, something, you're going to have to do something unpleasant. And then you go out to your own people and you say, yeah, we're going to have to do this, but the boss is making me do it. All these ways in which you never undermine your boss. If you can't work for somebody, then be a man about it. Go get another job. But if you ever come to the point where you don't have confidence and you can't feel like you can really, pump this guy up, then, so I wrote this whole like 17 different things. Here's what you need to do to be a great follower. And I pointed out, by the way, that we're all, I said, one of my greatest mentors that I had, who was a fabulous salesman himself, told me, he said, Augie, remember one thing, everybody got a boss. He said, the director reports to the vice president reports to the president reports to the CEO reports to the chairman of the board, and the chairman of the board reports to his wife. Everybody got a boss. And I point out that we go through in a day, we can be the leader or the follower many different ways in a single day. So we have to be absolutely. And I'll tell you a quick story. Is my very first sales job I ever had was up in Boston, as selling copy machines for 3M business products. And the third month that I was there, I was number one salesman in the whole New England. So they bring all the salesmen for all the other offices in, and all the managers and the vice president, and they have a big poobah thing, and they gave me a trophy. It was funny because it was a salesman holding a briefcase. And then speech. They got up there. I had to give a speech. I was 22 years old, and I got up there and I said, "Listen," I said, "there's no way I could have done this without the help of my manager, Kevin Moriarty. I said, I owe so much to Kevin. And that was just heartfelt. It was just the truth. It was just the truth. And all of a sudden, everybody, all these managers and executives start screaming, no, 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 this is your day. He gets plenty of credit. This is no, no, no. And I can see how much they loved me because of what I just did.
Mm.
Even though they were complaining like as if, oh, screw Moriarty, they were all friends. Screw Moriarty, I can see. And I remember that. Share credit. Most people hog credit.
Yeah.
Give it away. Share it like crazy, selflessly. But like you said, Mike, what has to happen, Aristotle said we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not a choice, it's a habit. We must become selfless. Yeah, you might start off because you have to say, well, I was listening to that darn Mike's podcast, and so I guess I got to share credit. So I'll do it. I don't like it, but I'll do it. You might have to start doing it that way. But the more you do it and the more the feedback comes back and the more you realize, then it becomes second nature. And selflessness becomes that second nature.
It's the art of reciprocity too. You made me think of it's the follower's job to support and make the leader look better. But if the leader has the exact same philosophy, it cycles back. And therefore, it's the leader's job to create other leaders and therefore support them as they grow. So it is like a cyclical program that's happening within the organization. And it even makes me think of something that I just learned about with dopamine, right? Dopamine, internal dopamine in your brain creates testosterone. And testosterone used properly to, go through pain and adversity a lot easier if you have testosterone, actually produces dopamine. And so everything is cyclical, all good things.
The virtuous cycle, the virtuous cycle, and in the last chapter of my book, my latest book, Business, Not Less Than Everything, I talk about how I had this tremendous spiritual experience in 1998 after a lot of hell and anguish that I went through in the desert. I had this incredible spiritual experience. I said, ever since then, it's as if I'm in a magical slipstream. Everything just happens. I mean, a guy walked in not too long after this happened. A guy walked in from Israel, and because he was into Russia, and I was a Russian history major, which everybody at Pitt said, "What the hell are you doing studying Russian history?" Well, I ended up becoming rich because of it, because he bought my company. He wasn't supposed to, he just did. And then the next thing you know, my college, everybody said, "Why are you working with these college students all the time? You're not on the faculty. You don't get paid. There's no compensation. These kids are a bunch of spoiled brats. They basically don't show up for class. They don't get credit for it. So it was all volunteer." And I kept doing it year after year. And you're also trying to run two companies, and you're doing this year after year after year. Well, first things that happened was that when I broke my ankle was when I started into my dark night of the soul in a skydiving accident, which, by the way, I talk about happy accidents a lot in the book. That when you're living a selfless life, things start to, you want to call it grace, we want to call it accidents. Happy accidents just start to happen. And I said the happiest accident was it was my college students that took me skydiving. Then I broke my ankle and I plunged into this dark night, which was the absolute dragon I had to face, which I had been trying not to face, even though I'd been on spirit all these lives. So I was forced to face it, but I owe that to the college students. And then the next thing you know, I get a call from one of my college students saying I'm at Mepkin Abbey. He introduced me to the monks. And then a few years later, my college students talked me into entering a contest, and I win $100,000, which leads me to get on Forbes, into Forbes and everything else I did. And then in 2009, Mike, I get a telephone call from a couple of my other college students, and they said, "We are in New York starting our own business, and we need your help." And so I flew up to New York, and I go to see them, and they said, "We need your help in sales. We're just starting out." They were in a little loft right off of Columbus Circle. Unfortunately, I said, "Sure, I'll help you out." And he said, "Well, we can't pay you. We don't have any money." And I said, "Oh, I'll just give you some stock." So they gave me like 200,000 shares of stock. I worked 3 months, and I go home, and I thought, "Oh, well, I did my good deed. They're not going to ever, 2013, they go public for 1.2 billion. The stock goes to $28 a share.
Oh, no.
So who was the idiot helping those college students for free for all those years? Um, the you know, but you have to get to the point, and this is the hardest thing. This is the hardest thing you have to learn in the desert and facing the dragon and all the hard work that you have to put in because it comes from hard work. You have to learn how to give without any hope of it's going to come back to you.
Mm.
The hardest thing to get rid of is if you're really trying to practice selflessness is you walk the little old lady across the street and then you say, Turex is happy. I better go buy a lottery ticket because I helped her and I'll win the lottery. No, that can't even cross your mind. You're not sitting there trying to think, how can I get Mike promoted? Because the quicker I get him promoted, the quicker I'll get promoted. You got to, and this is not all that strange. I've never been a parent, um, but but I had seven younger siblings. How many parents have I heard say that they get more pleasure while you're from Pittsburgh? You know Kennywood Park, right?
Hmm.
So that's an amusement park in Pittsburgh. And I remember one of my good friends from Pittsburgh telling me, he says, Augie, I got far more pleasure out of taking my kids to Kennywood than I ever got out of it myself. Every parent knows what it means to get more pleasure out of giving to their children than they ever could get by getting.
Wow.
That when their kid wins an award at school, it means so much more than when they won an award at school. So, what we're really talking about is taking that same philosophy and spreading it out over every area of your life so that you learn to be a giver and the pleasure comes in just the giving and the selflessness.
And I get
Um,
so much more enjoyment when my team makes a sale than whenever I make a sale, right? There is something that happens that says, wow, I see them win. And I don't know what it is, but you're right. I don't know what it's like with a kid because I don't have any children, but just having someone else around you that you've influenced in some degree win and you're somewhat responsible for that makes it way better than if you just did it on your own. It's
right,
truly incredible.
right, absolutely. I tell this story. This is one of my favorite stories in my whole business career. Is that I came into a company up in D.C. called Data Broadcasting. It doesn't matter, but um, I was there as a consultant, and one day the CEO came in. And he said, "I want you to take over as vice president of sales." He said, "He says we're not getting the guy that we got now is not getting it done, so I'm going to get rid of him, and I'm going to put you." And interestingly enough, I said I can only work 3 days a week, and why? Because I was working with college students 2 nights a week in Raleigh, and I couldn't be in D.C. And he's fine. I'll let you work 3 days a week because I think I'll get more out of you. And what I did in order to shake everything up from the very beginning to let them know there was a new sheriff in town um, is one of the very first things I did is I said, we're going to have a contest. And I came in wearing a big cowboy hat. And I'm going to put this hat out there in the middle, upside down. I said, and we're going to have it play a game and it's going to be called Top Gun. If you put that hat on, whoever puts that hat on is telling there was like 25 salesmen, is saying, I am the top guy. I'm the best guy. I'm the best salesman in this office. He said, and what you're going to do then is you're going to walk around to every other person and you're going to say, listen, I'm the top guy. Don't draw on me. Don't try to draw on me because I'm going to beat you. I said, every every person is going to have the opportunity to either challenge you or slink away and not challenge you. I said, if you beat everybody, you're going to get $1,000. Anybody who beats you will get $100. So I sat through that. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. I threw that hat and I was sweating bullets, Mike. What if nobody takes the hat? What if nobody wants to play the game? What am I going to do? Well, anyway, the tension was you could cut it with a knife. All of a sudden, this guy, Scott, grabs the net, puts it on. Blew my mind. One of the worst salesmen in the office. On top of that, I'd gotten to know him as being there as a consultant. He wasn't that bright. He wasn't the smartest, sharpest knife in the, but he put the hat on and he goes around to everybody. Everybody challenges. So he's got, and the way we sold was, would run commercials and and then the phones would ring and then they would try to close people on the phone for the products that we were selling. And I came and he went crazy. And I went in like the second day of the contest. It was a 1 week contest, and the commercial ran on TV. So when the tertial ran, they knew that the phone would start ringing in a minute or so after that. And there was a woman who hit the buttons to send the calls. And this guy Scott jumps on his feet and he screams at the woman, "Give me a call! For God's sake, give me a call!" And then he sees me standing there next to him, and he says, "Yeah, that look in your eye. My wife says I've got that look in my. And he ended up blowing everybody away. And not only did he blow everybody away, Mike, and win the contest, but every week after that, he was number one or number two. Couldn't stop the guy. By the
So
way,
what there is a great symbolism that he just expressed there. It's number one, taking ownership of a new identity. And
well,
then
listen to
that
what
new
listen
identity required a new hat that you wore, the standards that you
a
require.
transformation. He I one day I couldn't help it, because again, he was such a surprise to me. Scott Wilkes was his name. Last name was Wilkes, not that it matters. But I tapped him on the shoulder one day. I said, "Scott," I said, "you were always like the crappiest salesman on the sales force." I said, "Now you're number one or number two every week, knocking down everything." I said, "What's the answer?" And I remember he was sitting down, I was standing up. He looked up and he said, "Augie, once you know what it feels like to be your best, you never want to go back." And about 3 or 4 years later, I get an email from him. He was out in California making $500,000 a year, married, just killing it. And to me, to give people to work with, like you said, to successfully see people get a taste of that, to see that transformation happen, to build an organization of people like that, people couldn't understand we built this company that I talked about on $2,500. And we were a sales organization, and we started out selling other people's products. And within 3 months, 2 months or so, my vice president of sales, my partner, we would laugh about it because we'd always get a telephone call within about 6 weeks or 2 months or something from the vice president from the company that we were repping. And he'd say, "Hey, your sales force is now not killing mine 2-1. Could you please send me your pitch?" And we would laugh out loud because it happened again and again. And we'd say, "It's not in the pitch. It's not, it's in the intensity behind the pitch. It's the fact that our guys care more than your guys care, and that's a culture." And I kept saying, what do the Trappist monks have when it all comes down to it? They call it community. We can call it culture. I found out that this is a truism. What do soldiers do? They sacrifice not for them, for the company, the flag, for each other.
Mm-hmm.
When you build that esprit de corps in a sales force, for example, where nobody wants to be the weak link, nobody wants to let the other guys down. That's when you get peak performance. Where everybody's a team and everybody cares about each other and nobody wants to let everybody down. So the last thing I'll leave you with here, Mike, is I also have a chapter in Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks dedicated to what I call transformational organizations. And I said, what you need to build a transformation is you need a high overarching mission worthy of being selflessly served. And you need a path, a way for people to be transformed. And I said, well, I remember I said my first experience when I used to go to Microsoft a lot back in the early 90s. I used to be out there. We did a lot of business with them. I'd be out there a lot. And one time, and I'd always meet these young people, and they were always sleeping under their beds. They were always dying for Microsoft. They were always Microsoft, Microsoft, Microsoft. So I finally said to one guy, I said to him, "What's the secret? What is it?" He said, "Goat rodeos." I said, "What the hell is a goat rodeo?" He said, "I'll tell you what a goat rodeo is." He said, it's 8 o'clock on Friday night, and you get a call from Bill Gates, and he tells you he's going to be in Tokyo on Monday morning. and he wants to demo your product to an international audience. He said, and your product's only half done and it's buggy as hell. But somehow you and your team work all night and all day, all weekend. And just 10 minutes before he goes out there, he said, you get him the bits. And he goes out there and he knocks them dead. He said, that's one goat rodeo. And when you've done 3 or 4 goat rodeos, man, you've made your bones at Microsoft.
Never heard that.
You've made your bones at Microsoft. And so you got to build these goat rodeo attitude into your company. And I said, the greatest example, look at the Marines. I said, you come into the Marine Corps, you have a selfless service to serve the country, to serve your fellow Marines. That's what it's all service. Number 2, they have a method for you to become transformed. It's called boot camp. So you come in as a raw recruit. You're not even called a Marine. It's recruit Turex here. Yes, sir. Recruit Turex. You're a recruit. You can't call yourself a Marine. And you go through this 12-week hell, the dragon. You go into the desert and you go through this 12-week, and many's a time you feel like you've died and, and you hate your drill sergeant and everything. And then you come through the other side and you become a Marine. And then these guys spend the rest of their lives. Once a Marine, always a Marine.
Their new identity. It's that new hat.
That new hat. And they're in Alcoholics Anonymous is another one. I said, people don't, you're not cured of alcoholism. What you're transformed from an alcoholic into a recovering alcoholic by means of the 12-step program. And what's the high overarching mission? What is the way in which it's counterintuitive, but what is the way that Alcoholics Anonymous says to keep sober? Help somebody else to stay sober.
Keep them accountable.
Help them stay sober. The more you forget your own alcoholism and concentrate on helping somebody else who's an alcoholic, the easier it is for you to stay sober. So that's a transformation. And so you go through this 12-step program, and all of these programs, whether it's the Marine Corps or AA, and I mentioned a few more in my book, all have these same hero's journey functions to them. And so I'm here to tell, I don't have to tell you, I don't believe, Mike, you and I are on the same page on this, but anybody else that's listening or watching today, you can't avoid the desert. You cannot avoid paying your dues. You can't avoid the goat rodeos. You can't avoid the trials and tribulations, the Sturm und Drang, the storm and stress. In matter of fact, if you want this wonderful experience, this transformative experience, you got to go looking for this. Mm-hmm. You go looking for I have a personal trainer, who I love the guy. I mean, he's a son of a bitch. I mean, we just did legs this morning. You know what he did to me this morning too. This is typical of him too. He said to me, I go to the stretch zone to get stretched afterwards, and he said, you got stretched today? And I said, no, that's Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. He said, huh, all right. I said, I know why you asked that. I said, why? He says, because you're going to give me extra time today. He says, yeah, something like that. It's son of a brick gave me 20 minutes of extra. It tortured me for 20. It was an hour and 20 minutes rather than a regular hour. Yeah, I could find a lot of trainers that were a lot easier than him. Mm-hmm. His whole gym, he's got his own gym, and it's, winners train, losers complain. Shut up, nobody cares. That's his whole motto. And I've been working with him for 12 years. And I feel great because I'm willing to pay the price. You got to be willing to pay the price. And if anybody comes up with eat anything you want and still lose weight approach to all this stuff, whether it's spirituality, which is what it is, just say your mantra twice a week. Just go to your little yoga class on Fridays. Just say that, this little, no, you're being conned.
Right. Discipline
you
equals freedom. And there's that great book about that if you really want to obtain freedom, you have to have discipline. You need to have a regimen. You need habits. And there's another great quote that I've seen. If you want to be a loser, do everything that you feel like and don't do anything that you don't feel like, right? So like
Exa-
you will stay mediocre, you will not get anywhere, you're going to eat whatever you want, you're going to get fat, you're going to be lazy. It's all of that looking for the dragon and not running from it. And to quote Joseph Campbell, the cave you fear holds the treasure you seek. So run
Absolutely.
towards that damn cave.
Absolutely. I take it even I define the cave even more specifically. You have to develop a habit of turning into the fear rather than turning away from the fear.
It's a muscle. There's no
It's
doubt.
a it's a turn into, if you're afraid to give public speaking, give public speeches. If you're afraid of something, that's the thing you need to do. And I remember my old Zen teacher, which is my latest book, Not Less Than Everything, has a lot in the first half about my crazy West Virginia hillbilly Zen master from Wheeling, West Virginia. Um, and he says you have to develop the ability to force yourself. He said, no, he said, everybody wants to be constantly inspired. He said, that's impossible. And we want to work spiritually when we feel like it. He said, you've got to be absolutely, you got to be able to force yourself. And later on in my book, I quote him again because he said, you have to have self-discipline. If you don't master yourself, you will always live with shame.
Mm.
And we have so many people in our culture now who are against shame, and because they're pretending that if they just pretend they're not ashamed of the way they're living, they won't be ashamed. And so it's just a game to try and, well, no, if you don't control yourself, you always. But I'm going to add two more things to your little formula, which is a great formula, Mike. You need a teacher, you need a mentor. They say that the doctor who treats himself has a fool for a patient. The lawyer who defends himself has a fool for a client. The man who is his own guru has a fool for a follower.
Right?
You need a teacher. We don't have any problem going to doctors, to go into shrinks, to go into personal trainers, going to nutritionists. But damn it, the most important part of your life is your spiritual life. You're going to do that all yourself. So you need that. Second thing is community. Third thing, community. Fourth thing, community. You need a community of fellow seekers that can give you honest feedback. They can tell you you're getting a little bit crazy this way. You're overdoing this. You need a community of people. And look at it. Is it easier? I ask you, Mike, rhetorically, because I know what answer you're going to give. Is it easier to go to the gym by yourself, or is it easier when you have a workout buddy?
When somebody is holding you accountable, and when the universe, you could even put it that way, when the universe holds you accountable, it's
Right. And
sure to get done.
if you don't want to be the guy, if you don't want to disappoint your friend, because the fact of the matter is, most of us will do for other people what we won't do for ourselves.
Hmm.
And so you can use that to work to your own advantage. So my only, winding up Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, what we're talking about here, Mike, I hate to even use the word disappointment, because the book has been so much more successful than I ever dreamed it could possibly be. But the only slight, you know, you know, I don't complain, but sometimes I can't complain. Sometimes is that in the last chapter of the book, I scream, is almost by putting it all in capital letters. I didn't do that, but I could have, where I'm saying, reading this book and a million like them will not do you a bit of good unless you take action. And you will only you need a community. You need to work in a group setting. You need, even if it's just some friends to get together on Friday nights or whatever, which is what I used to do. I used to have 40 people come to my house on Friday nights, and we would work together on stuff. Sometimes it was just easy stuff, or easy stuff to do, like New Year's resolutions, and we'd hold each other accountable to do them. But so in all the years since the book has been out, I keep waiting for somebody to call me up and say, "Hey, I've started a community, or I'm thinking about starting a community. Can you give me some pointers?" Or, no. There's a wonderful story that I tell about Warren Buffett. Um, his biographer, this woman who wrote his biography, said everybody thinks that Buffett gives his success to his his Wharton Business School and his mentor, Benjamin Graham. He said, but if you ask Buffett what he really credits for his success, he said he calls it the Andrew Carnegie, Dale Carnegie, the Dale Carnegie course. He said, but the difference between Warren, he said, and other people is most people read Dale Carnegie's book and they say, yeah, this is really cool. And then they put it up on the shelf and forget about it. He said, not Warren. He worked the system and worked the system and worked it. He said, and then sometimes he'd forget it for a while. He'd come back and work it again and work it again and work it again. What I want people to do, God bless, for their own sake, not for my sake, with Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, is work the system that I outlined there. And the first thing you need to do is get teachers, get fellow students, and work it. One of the nicest things about, I met I got together with Michael Keaton a couple of years ago out in California, and one of the first things I said to him, I said, Mike, I said I was down at the monastery, and one of the monks said, you showed up at the monastery. And he said, yeah. He said, I love your book. He said, I had to share. So all he did was very, very humbly. He showed up. Supposedly, the monks told me he showed up at like 7 o'clock in the morning and at the guest center and introduced himself as a friend of Augie Turax. That's all he said about himself. And he spent a day there with the monks. But you got to work. You got to work the system, and it's so hard to do. Because so much of what we're talking about today, Mike, I'm sure you'll agree with me, is countercultural. The flow of what everybody else around you is doing is going with the flow. My old Zen teacher said, you go with the flow if you want, because people used to, oh, go with the flow, go with the flow. He said, you go with the flow if you want, but I've followed up a few flows in my day, and they all end up in the same place, the sewer.
Wow, that's so well said. Yeah, that's what the average person around you is doing, and you
exactly.
not follow in their footsteps.
And if you are hanging around, if somebody is the drum beat is boom, 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 you will eventually start boom. It's so hard to resist it.
Yep.
I mean, if you end up going to prison for 20 years on false charges, and you're a really wonderful person, it's highly much more likely that you're going to come out a criminal than that you're going to convert all them into being a nice guy. Exactly. Because we are what we hang out with. That's our parents told us, don't be careful who you hang out. And when you're hanging out with people that don't care about anything but money and power and getting laid, then if you're trying to do something different with your life, you're swimming desperately against the tide, and you need the help of teachers and other people. So that's what I'd leave you with.
Great, man. I'm going to put you in touch with one of my clients. You and him are going to have an amazing conversation. He's looking for a guest, and you guys will talk for days about the exact same stuff. You remind me so much of him. So anyways, August Turak, you have a website out there, guys. I'm sure you got a lot of value from him, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Go listen to episode 79. He goes into great detail there. But the website, augustturak.org, it looks like you have a foundation. So
yep.
I guess, do you raise money through this, or is this something that you just do on your own time?
Well, pretty much I do everything on my own. All of the money that I take in through the sale of books, my lectures, consulting, anything that I do, I consider my spiritual work, goes into my foundation. And the mission of the foundation is to help people find higher meaning and purpose, that's in a world that so many people seem to find bereft of meaning and purpose. And depression is the number one disease in the Western civilization today. 40% of incoming freshmen in colleges are on antidepressants, and it's because they lack a sense of higher meaning and purpose. Religion has declined, and we haven't substituted anything else for it. Except maybe political activism, which is a terrible, terrible.
Yeah, it's God's going away from the school and from the family, right?
Right.
And is getting replaced with something, and that something is not good.
Exactly.
So, guys, check out his books for sure on Amazon. Like you said, a portion of it goes to the foundation, or all proceeds.
All of it. All of it.
All proceeds go to this foundation.
I don't take it. My old Zen teacher said, "Don't. A spiritual person shouldn't eat off the altar."
Love it. Hey, the key to life is selflessness, guys. And if you really want to become successful, help other people become successful. If you want to become wealthy, help other people become wealthy. And that is the name of the game. So, August Turak, can you come
Well,
back
as he
on
used to say, he said
episode 200?
the best way to learn math is to teach math.
Yeah. Well, that's another there's another experiment that was done whenever it comes to jujitsu teachers. They always teach their student something, and the next day they come back for having this, and they have the student teach them or a class. Why? Because you learn more when you teach. It is so wild how the human
Right.
body
It's
works.
there's so many examples of giving being a better strategy than taking.
So, August, thank you
God
so
bless.
much,
God
man.
bless,
I
Mike.
really appreciate your time. Guys, check them out. Remember, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life.